Hello, everybody. Welcome to a really cool interview that we're going to be doing today with Hannah Wolf. Hannah, you're someone that I've looked up to for several years after discovering The Science of Tattooing, a book that's been referenced by many across the world, by pigment companies, by tattooers alike, a great resource. So not only an author here today, a collaborator of wonderful information for the tattoo industry, but a really great tattooer as well. So Hannah, I'm excited that you're here with Gabe and I. If I didn't mention, I'm Lauren. I've got Worldwide Ink Magazine and a tattoo mapper that I'm working with. I've worked with tattooers for most of my adult life, so it's something that I really, really love. And I love the rabbit holes of the pigment, the needle research that you're doing. So today will be a really great opportunity to talk about that and the upcoming Paradise Tattoo Gathering happening very soon.
October 24th to the 27th in 2024. So if you're watching before the show, come on out. If you're watching afterwards, I'm sure there's replays. So yeah, Hannah will be on stage doing a presentation based. Well, I guess we're going to find out exactly how much it's based through the book. Now, the book is 4 years old now, so you've been able to get a fair amount of feedback. I imagine it was fun to listen to some of the other podcasts that you have out there. But well, anyways, tell us a little bit about the book, and again, there's other places where people could dive deep into it, and then maybe talk about what your talk at Paradise will be about.
Yeah, so the book is a material science and just kind of general science deep dive into like the physiology, chemistry, and physics around some general concepts in tattooing, how sensation works, how pain in the body works, sensation perception, some stuff on how our eyes work, the visible light spectrum, the physics of the visible light spectrum, which also kind of goes a little bit into like the physics of tattoo removal, how all of that works. There's a little bit more about how tattooing, like when you shouldn't be tattooing a person, what an actual allergic reaction is to the tattoo process, what happens in the body once the tattoo is in the body, once the pigment's in the body. And in my opinion, the most important part of the book is the chemistry about what tattoo pigment is, the differences between dyes and inks, and just kind of a generalization as to the differences between carbon chain and polymer based pigments and something like a metal salt. And then also like, how different people have different reactions to different types of metals that are attached to carbon chains, as well as different metal salts, as well as like cheaper metal needles that you can find from the internet.
But there's only 3 factories
Amazon.
That make needles. That's amazing. No, it's such a great depth of subjects. It's amazing. Now, could you talk a little bit, like, how are you? I mean, obviously you're talking to scientists. How did you bridge into, getting expert advice from scientists? And then it'd be fun to talk about the scientific mentality too, especially these days. There's so much, just the word science somehow has become a loaded word, it seems.
Well, I've owned a shop for a long time, with owning various tattoo shops and teaching different tattooers how to tattoo, and just kind of like being the head of like the ship. People asked me questions. I couldn't necessarily like answer questions super directly. So I started asking harder questions and trying to find answers to them. I studied a little bit of like biology and chemistry in college before I like decided I just wanted to be a tattooer. But I've been tattooing for almost 22 years. So when I started this book to basically try to find like the answers to like these general, like, I guess, science questions, I reached out to people that were like in my personal network, as an individual, as well as like hiring scientists off the internet. So I had a team of about 12 people that helped me with this project. And then when I like reached out to different Facebook groups saying that I was doing this project, I connected with other tattooers that were also really passionate about science of tattooing, regulation. Different ink companies have reached out to me to ask questions. I connected with Selena Medina, who's been on a number of different boards. She's worked with the Association of Professional Tattooers. She's worked with the Association of Food and Drug Officials. So she's been like a board member of these different organizations that like basically help regulatory agencies nationally. She's also worked with a couple, I think she's worked with a couple of different pigment companies, doing like research and science with them. So she was a great resource to work with on the book. She connected me with a bunch of different people, but I think it was just kind of having like a deep general curiosity and being really frustrated that I couldn't find these answers easily about things on the internet, because you can type something into Google, and especially these days you'll get an AI answer, but it's really hard to actually know what is true.
Sure.
Yeah, so I kind of set about making this document to kind of have like a brief overview of these scientific elements in tattooing to make a peer-reviewed document that actually did have a lot more like scientific clout, written by medical doctors and PhDs, and people that have spent their life, like I have spent my life learning tattoo. They have spent their lives like learning these deeper scientific elements and being in academia and education.
Learning how to do actual research.
Yes.
I think one of the great things too is not only that it was a resource for a lot of the tattoo companies as well, because across the U.S. and I remember I was in Germany last summer and we were out to dinner, and I was sitting next to the CEO of Cheyenne, and I mentioned your book, and he was so excited because he actually bought copies for his staff, just because it's a wonderful, like you said, resource by peers, a single source of truth. It's really great to know that tattoo professionals from the top to bottom, this is really, really impactful for. And I haven't seen anything like it since, I believe I spoke to you a handful of years ago, maybe about even more research coming as well and things ahead. So I think it's really great. And Lena Medina, of course, as you referenced, has been wonderful for the APP and this sort of information to share with the public through this MOCRA thing that's happening, I think is wonderful. It's like you knew ahead of time as things were kind of really going to be leaning on this sort of research to provide that in a really, really professional way.
Yeah, honestly, the book could have been twice as long, but I self-funded this whole project, basically just to try to get awareness out in the community as best as I could, just to try to like help educate the tattoo industry and collectors and people that are curious about these things, as well as to educate myself. My hope was to do like a second edition of the science of tattooing and get a lot more into wound healing and like a bunch of other characteristics of tattooing, also because since this book has been published, regulation has started to change in the EU as well as potentially in the United States. So it would be nice to do an update on this book at some point, but I also tattoo full time and own and manage a studio. So finding the time to do this book in the first place was really hard. So hopefully someday I'll be able to carve out a little bit of time to extend this project for it to continue on, to continue to be relevant as the regulation and industry continue to change.
Yeah, which is, clearly happening fast. It's amazing watching tattooing. I mean, we've all been involved with it for decades at this point, right? And we know exactly how big it's getting. And, it was definitely one thing when it was, a wicked, small, niche-y, outskirtsy kind of a craft. But there's billions of dollars at stake now, right? So like, stuff that used to fly 10 years ago or certainly 20 years ago just shouldn't. Maybe it never should have. But now, you can't scale that, the way it was before, which is crazy. So just to watch, regulators that are trying to figure out what's going on, with tattooers who, some of the tattooers know what's going on, but your point, you had to self-fund scientific research to actually get some of those answers. So let's not give away too much because you are going to be doing a talk at Paradise, and we'll be recording it and streaming it. But what parts do you have carved out to discuss for that hour or 90 minutes? I'm not sure exactly how long it was.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take the most interesting subjects of the book. And in my opinion, like some of the most relevant parts that are relating to the ink chemistry and the visible light spectrum, just to talk about like color specifically. So color and then like a little bit of ink chemistry. I'm not going to talk so much into specifics of specific inks, just because, again, like regulation is changing in what can and cannot be used for specific types of color additives, but just more of like a chemical generalization as to like what these different molecules are, what these different compounds are, what may have like potential toxicity or give complications to clients, and like what tattooers can look for, or how to find material safety data sheets, how to read those, just to like be like a more enlightened tattooer and a better tattooer to serve their own business as well as their clientele.
Awesome. I only have personally, I have plenty of questions, but my only next question that I had prepared was, how do you know which scientists to trust, and or how can we trust that you're not just paying the scientists to tell you, isn't that one of the, paranoid memes out there? Like, why do we trust the scientists so much? What do they know? And you are literally telling us that you were funding these scientists to do stuff. I don't know. I guess one of my questions is like, you've been dealing with the actual scientists and actual research. So I'm interested to know what that's like, or the differences between or how basically how you vetted your scientists and how you know that the science that they're doing is right on.
Yeah, so that's a really wonderful question. The reason that I didn't author this book specifically, so if you have the book, you'll see that each chapter is written by some different scientists. The reason that I didn't like give myself an authorship on each of these chapters is that I did want there to be some type of like scientific validity to the credit of the philosophic doctorate and medical doctorate that these people had, or their master's degrees, etc. I basically gave these people questions, and we worked out outlines for each of these chapters together, and then we went through it. So Dr. Shelley Mason, her mother was a tattooer in the 80s and 90s. I used to work with her sister. So she has somewhat of a connection to tattooing. She's also an educator. So she kind of co-authored that first portion of the book about physiology with me. Dr. David Warmflash is fantastic. Basically, I interviewed a lot of different scientists and doctors online to see who would be the best fit to help me write. Dr. Warmflash specifically has a really interesting background where he's not only a medical doctor who's worked with NASA, but he also has a PhD in astrobiology and is already a scientific author. So he had just like the perfect resume to help me with our projects. Dr. Kevin Chu is someone I've known for a long time. He has a master's degree in microbiology, and he has a doctorate of chiropractic. So he had a really special place to basically author a chapter about pain and how the pain works through our spinal system to our brain. So there were very specific people that like I worked with, and we kind of like sat down and tried to decide like, okay, what do we really need to put in this book? How we're going to put it in there. And then I reached out to other medical professionals and other scientists, including people that are on boards for the body art division of the Association of Food and Drug Officials, to do peer review for me. So like I said, we had like 12 people working on this book, and you're only seeing you're only seeing four. You're only seeing the main authors and myself. And then we had many other people that were editing the book, peer reviewing the book, looking over things. So we really wanted to make sure that the information itself was in fact correct, and that it was authored in a way that was accurate to people, and also unbiased, which is a big reason I didn't want to work with any chemists that have any relationship to any tattoo pigment companies. So I kind of wanted this whole project to be like an unbiased, like 1990s retro textbook that you would find in like an introductory science class, that could be generally digestible to somebody with like no collegiate background.
Awesome. Lauren, do you have any other questions or comments, or I don't want to hog the conversation.
Oh, no, it's really great. I was just curious, how have your clientele reacted to this? Do you have like really cool conversations, or have you met even more people after authoring the book that it's just been a really great impact on your life? Or could you explain or touch on how the impact of the book has changed your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have links to the Science of Tattooing on like business websites for the tattoo studio, as well as like my individual tattoo websites, because like as a collective studio, as well as myself, like we want our clientele to know that like we are a progressive and well-educated studio that do in fact care about like deep concepts within tattooing, and we're not just here to like make art and make money. Like this is something greater for us. We are in a unique geographic position within the United States, where we are surrounded by not only like leading technology companies, also leading biotechnology companies, as well as very prestigious educational facilities like UC Stanford, UC Berkeley. The studio is right down the street from UC Berkeley. I tattoo a great deal of people that have graduate degrees, often in science, or some kind of like technology research. And we have fantastic conversations because we can talk about things that, you know, obviously they're going to have a greater understanding than I do, into like deeper scientific subjects because that's something they work in or study. But they really appreciate like the depth of knowledge that myself and other people around my studio have about the human body, as well as like the materials that we're using throughout the tattoo process and why we use the specific materials within the tattoo process when we do and how we do. We also have a very arduous release form that we have everybody fill out, and we ask some pretty invasive questions, but we have a purpose within each of those questions so that we can greater understand before the tattoo procedure, as to like whether we may have complications if we're using specific materials within the process.
Oh yeah, that's super cool. I bet that is a really great thing for educating the people around you, especially some, even though tattoos are very common, but the collegiate level academia style people, then, you know, it's really unique, especially now, like we've kind of touched on with MOCRA happening, and more eyeballs are on this subject around the world.
Yeah, one of the things that story kind of reminded me, I was just at Jeff Gogwe's new seminar, and he brought in some philosophers and some clients, right? And so it's in a similar manner, you know, the philosopher, academic, you know, tattoo collector, you know, inherently is talking and thinking about tattoos in a deep philosophical way, right? And so then Jeff's always like, you know, getting that talk to her and ask questions and learn all of them. And it's fun to when you know, when you're tattooing, like, you know, again, wicked smart clients, and then those clients are bringing that information and their education into the, you know, tattoo world, like through the tattooers. It's just amazing to watch watch it roll back and forth. It'd be fun to, I imagine you have some pretty fun dinners and having some good conversations with that crew there. So wicked excited to catch up and hear some stories in person about some scientists, real scientists who do real research. I'm sorry, I don't even mean to keep stressing that, but I'm still somewhat addicted to Facebook. So fucking, shit's flying in my face every day.
Yeah, I think it's really great that you took those measures too, because even there's different scientific research that's been criticized or even in do right to be criticized, but it's great that you took that measure to make sure that it was laid out the way it was, and it was wonderfully written. It took me a very long time to get through it, but it was wonderfully written.
Awesome. Do you have any other particular topics that you'd like to talk with while we're on the video, or?
Yeah, I mean, I want to touch a little bit about like general education on the industry.
Please.
I think like as an industry, we've been self-regulating for so long. I think something people in the industry have been doing that's not necessarily the most appropriate is they've been very anti-education. And here we are going to like a big summit that's full of education and seminars, and we're going to be surrounded by other tattooers that are really interested in learning and bettering themselves. And I think it's up to the type of people who really believe in that to understand that in order for our industry to survive and stay somewhat free, we have to really embrace a greater deal of education and from day one. So something like tattoo schools have often been like really criticized. But I think as an industry, we need to start understanding that as tattoo becomes more popularized and more open to younger generations and everybody out there, and it's no longer taboo, that there needs to be like a set core value of understanding and education in the industry for every single tattooer. And if you're not out there trying to better yourself and learn and get the materials and do something like Paradise and do something like reinventing the tattoo and Tattoo Now and trying to better yourself as a tattooer, you're doing yourself as well as your clientele a disservice. You're doing the industry a disservice because we do need to have some kind of like set core value and education within the industry as an industry in order to be able to progress appropriately into the future. And we need to work with regulators, not against regulators, in order to develop fundamentals for the tattoo industry, in order to like have the appropriate measures in place to continue doing our art, to continue serving our clientele, to continue letting this industry thrive without having people step in that know nothing about tattooing. So regulators are your friends. Don't fight them. If they have input, it's a conversation that you have with them, not against them. As well as like when it comes to education and bettering yourself, like we all always have something to learn. So push yourself to continue to learn things because we're learning every day. Tattooing is hard. It's constantly changing. Our materials are changing. Our tools are changing. The industry is changing. So be open to it.
If there's one thing that never changes, is that everything's always changing. Awesome. No, that was well said. And as far as like education, right? And obviously, Guy got pushed back in the day, and I'll get pushed back. I'm a non-tattooer, hosting a summit about education, and in some ways, if you put all of the stuff together from all of the projects that and again with your books and all the books, and they're already kind of like someone's going to make the awesome, legitimate tattoo school or tattoo track on a university. And when I'm thinking about it, just fundamentally, it was always like, if somebody's against education, like that doesn't even make sense. Like we like knowledge is meant to be shared. It's literally, one of the best returns on investment that exists, the transference of your brain, what you've learned to other people, the return on that, right? Like you spend a lot of energy and a lot of money and a lot of resources to learn a lot of these things that you can then like communicate to people through an hour. And like you could sum up a lot of, not all of it, of course, experience and you could hear something and not fully comprehend or understand it. But the main point is when people are thinking about bottling up education, or fundamentally, right? And I'm not saying that, I would give away every single bit of knowledge that I knew to anybody for free, right? Like there's assholes. I don't want to give my knowledge to assholes to enable them, if I could help it. Anyways, I guess mostly well said. I can't wait to see where the future of education, goes. And I'll appreciate you, contributing to it, to the event, and obviously to the book and to the greater tattoo world with things like the books and bringing the scientists in. And well, there we go. Thank you very much. I'm excited to hear the talk.
I was going to say too, before we head off, it's really great that you also mentioned like the APT and some of these other resources who are pulling people together in that positive name of education and things like that with great resources. So it's wonderful that things are hopefully going in the proper direction, that aren't convoluted by, people trying to make money or anything like that. Real, true education. I've noticed even in the APT that they've started implementing more research that goes into the apprenticeship process, making sure that education is included from day one as well. So that's a positive direction that I hope we'll see more of.
Awesome. Okay. Well, hey, thank you very much. I do need to hard out because speaking of reinventing that meeting, they're asking for the link.
Okay.
So let me stop the recording here.
How does starting with a small-scale drawing influence the final tattoo design?
I've always found it important to start with a small thumbnail sketch, just because your thinking process is more overall. You can really kind of grasp the whole composition at once when you're drawing small. When you draw large, you tend to get hung up in details and smaller shapes and other aspects of the design that aren't important yet. You want to be thinking about just those few large shapes that are going to anchor the whole composition. That's why it's nice to start with drawings that are just a few inches tall, smaller than a playing card. From there, you can always expand and go as far as you need to with it.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to continue on to the next video, click over here. To check out our YouTube channel for more awesome tattoo content, click here. And if you're interested in taking your tattoos to the next level, follow this link right here.